Hello, welcome back to the channel. It's been a long time since I've done a theology/religion type video, so I thought it was overdue, and there's some topics I wanted to dive into. I will try to keep this brief, just some quick ideas that are really applicable to the mindset you need to have to properly process claims about religion and as well as other forms of knowledge. So we're mostly focusing on epistemology, or the study of how you get knowledge, the process of filtering knowledge, and how we can detect what is false, what is true. And so these are just some quick principles slash methods that I think are really interesting. So the first off, we have repeatability. There's probably a better phrase or term to use. This is just off the top of my head here, but if we destroy it, does it come back? If you took the concept of the atom or electricity and we just erased it from every school book, every scientific paper written about the atom or electricity, eventually humanity would rediscover it, and it would be exactly the same as it is today. So we would not come up with a new concept. It would still be the atom. It would still be electricity. If we destroyed every piece of evidence we have for how to fly an aircraft, down the road someone would discover, hey, you know, we can move this object, and the difference in air pressure causes lift, and we would rediscover aerodynamics, and it would maybe not be completely identical, but we would have aircraft and helicopters and eventually space flight. These are all based on these fundamental principles which do not change. And so by the flip side, if we took this concept, this first point, and we apply that to religion, if we destroyed every copy of the Quran, if we destroyed every copy of the Bible, and let's even for the sake of argument say whatever people have memorized in their lifetime, that is still retained. The Quran, the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, these would never come back in exactly the same form, because just like today, they're mostly based on how people interpret it, how people viewed that document. And so trying to get it word for word exactly right, it may never be exactly what it used to be. And that's because really it was based on more of an idea instead of some principle that was immutable. So if the Bible were rewritten today, it may never mention slavery. If it was rewritten today, it might not mention the flood or creation, because these are concepts that we've since discovered are not accurate. So the main problem being we can't test this with religion, because it's almost impossible to hunt down and destroy every single copy of the book and test the concept of whether it would come back or not. But I think it's highly unlikely that we would get the exact version of those holy works today that we have currently if we completely eradicated them from physical evidence. And next we have falsifiability. So is it even possible, is there any remote possibility that you can debunk the concept that you're talking about? An example of this would be if we wanted to debunk evolution, it would be really easy to do, and all that would have to be presented would be some form of evidence that this species did not evolve from another species, but instead just popped into existence with no prior descendants. Or, for example, we look through the fossil record and we see, you know, the simple creatures really long time ago and the more complex creatures, and we only see apes and humans in the last 2 million years. And so if we were to find apes or humans much earlier in the fossil record without any evidence of the geological layers being overturned or folded or any other disruption, if we legitimately found complex fossils much earlier in that timeline, that would disrupt things, that would cause it to to be disproven. Or, for example, if we found some evidence in the DNA of a creature that it was, in fact, again, not the result of these random mutations over time or pressure from what we would call the survivability of that species. So there's a pressure because the survival of the fittest concept. But if the species came into existence and it has no ties to these other forms of life, if it had no relation as far as where it inherited those genes from, that would be an indication that some being created this creature out of whole cloth. And yet, when you ask a creationist what would disprove your claims, or if you ask someone what would disprove how you view the Bible, and there is no answer to that, there's always another excuse layered on top of those excuses, which give us this picture that there is nothing that will disprove it in their eyes. And so this is a dangerous mindset, because you're completely inflexible in that mentality, and so your ideas and concepts are effectively immune from criticism. And this is not something that is a good thing. You need to have that willingness to say, what does the evidence say? Therefore, we change our mentality to reflect reality. And so, something that is not falsifiable doesn't mean it's a good thing. So even something as absolutely concrete as the theory of the atom, yeah, it's falsifiable. If we could find some piece of evidence that said atoms are not, in fact, what make up all of existence, and there's, various ways that would, we come up with a mathematical formula saying that the atom can't be split or whatever. The point is, you're willing to look at these special cases that would completely overturn your entire concept and viewpoint. And if there is no case where that exists, or there's no way to come up with this concept of what would overturn your concept and idea, then it's not falsifiable. Now, third, the outsider test. This is a little bit different line of thinking, but really what it comes down to is, if an alien species came to Earth and they had no prior knowledge of how we do things and how we handle our religion and science and our epistemology, how would you explain some of these concepts to them in a way that they would grasp and accept? So if you sold the idea of electricity to an alien species that had no concept of electricity for whatever reason, we could explain it by simply breaking down the free flow of electrons and the positive, negative, and how that creates energy. And so if we take that same concept, we apply it to Islam, and we say, oh, there was this prophet and he got this vision that he was the one true spokesperson for God, and because he worked these miracles, and the aliens were like, hold on, wait a second, let's can you explain that? Like, what is your proof that this guy did these things? And someone comes up with the idea for, this guy called Jesus was persecuted and he was killed, and then he came back to life 3 days later. And again, how would you sell that to an alien who doesn't understand the history of where that came from in the culture? How would you explain why you accept it, in other words? And yeah, in some ways that's a silly way to frame it, but it highlights this fact that many people presuppose that their conclusions are true. So they come out of the gate saying, yes, everything in the Bible is completely accurate and we can believe everything exactly the way it is. That fails the outsider test, because the outsider will not accept everything exactly the way you've already accepted it. So the outsider test is really about starting from scratch and saying you have to demonstrate every single claim that you do, or every single claim that you make has to be backed up before you can make additional claims that are based on those first layers. So someone says Jesus rose from the dead because we have written testimony from 4 or 5 people, and the written testimony came 20, 30 years after the fact. And so the person has to accept that as true before we can accept the claims written in those testimonies. Like, would you believe something that was written 30 years after eyewitness events and there's no corroboration from secular historians? There's no corroboration with contemporary historians. Then we have this issue where that fails the outsider test, because the outsider concept rejects the first layer of the claim, which is that we can believe anything based on just the eyewitness testimony of a very small number of people. And so repeatability, falsifiability, the outsider test, these are areas where religion fails. They either fail to provide the necessary prerequisites for that to be effective or to pass those tests, or it simply doesn't even try. In many cases, a lot of religions are based on someone accepting it completely independently from the evidence, and it's simply based on emotion and feeling. And so that's just my viewpoint on it. Of course, you're free to disagree, and I welcome any discussion and debate, because I think that's a lot of fun. And if you haven't watched the podcast yet, be sure to check that out. Check out the other YouTube channel, Tech Tips. Yeah, I've got that. It's a little bit hard to find now because of YouTube search algorithms, but I'm going to link that below. And I hope you guys have a great day, and we will hopefully not have a long wait until the next video. Thanks.